Everyone, my name is Thangsho Khabile and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking the play button. I am happy to be communicating with you today. Today I am talking to singles. And my topic is before marriage requirements. So singles is everyone who's not married, whether you are dating, or some people call it courtship. Church people call it courtship, or you are not dating or courting, but you desire to get married one day. So this message is for you, and we will be learning these requirements from 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 14 to 16. This passage is normally used to teach singles, and I will be doing the same thing and unpacking the passage just to learn the things that we need to know before you sign that contract. Lifetime contract. Yes, so let me read it. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 14 to 16 NIV. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial? Or what does a believer have in common with unbeliever? Verse 16, what agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? So I will put the picture below of a yoke. So the first requirement, the first before marriage requirement is in verse 14, which is be equally yoked. Be equally yoked. So Wikipedia defines yoke as a wooden beam normally used between a pair of oxen or other animals to enable them to pull together on a load when working in pairs. So here Wikipedia teaches us that a yoke, the purpose of a yoke is to pair. The purpose of a yoke is to pull together, and the third purpose to pull together the load. Pull together the load. And when you are a believer in Jesus, if you follow this channel, you will know that the core and the center of this channel is Jesus. And actually this passage, Paul was talking to believers. It was a letter to believers. So the first thing that Paul here is saying that if you are a believer in Jesus, don't pair and pull the load with unbeliever in Jesus. So that's what it means when you are unequally yoked. When you try to pair in order to pull the load with the person that is not a believer and you are a believer, that's what it means to be unequally yoked. So Paul is saying, don't do that. Don't do that. So that's the first lesson. And then which is the first before marriage requirement. The second before marriage requirement that I have here is common in righteousness. Common in righteousness. We see that again in verse 14. Let me read it again. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? So your righteousness needs to be common, which can also mean moral standards. Your moral standards needs to be common. And as Christians, our moral standards or our template for righteousness is the word of God. So that needs to be common. That needs to be common. Your how you view life, which should be in the word of God, needs to be common, and other things. So I don't know, single, if you have been in this situation, but I have experienced this before, going on a date with a guy that I'm trying to get to know and trying to have a conversation about belief. And so what normally happens is that if the belief is not common, if we are having different beliefs, this topic of belief can become uncomfortable and it can also be draining. Yeah, so if you are in that situation, or if that ever happens, make sure that you don't ignore the topic, because what can happen is that you can try to ignore the topic and focus on love and feelings, because the topic it's uncomfortable and draining. So don't ignore the topic, or don't ignore this fact that your righteousness is not common. Don't ignore it, because Paul is warning us against it. Paul is saying, guys, this is important. This is important. Your righteousness needs to be common. Yeah, so make sure that before you sign that contract, righteousness is common. Yeah, you are equally yoked. Yes. And then the third requirement that I have here of before marriage requirement is fellowship. Fellowship. And we also see that in verse 14, Paul is asking actually, what fellowship can light have with darkness? The truth is that there is no fellowship between darkness and light. Is using the example of darkness and light. Yeah, and the NIV version used the word fellowship. King James version used the word communion. And the meaning of communion, the Greek word for the word communion is koinonia, which means partnership and participation. So fellowship means partnership, or communion means partnership and participation. So how are we expecting partnership and participation if the main thing, if the belief is not the same, if righteousness is not common? Yeah, how are we expecting fellowship? There won't be fellowship. So it's a requirement before marriage. There needs to be fellowship. If you are going to spend the rest of your life with someone, there needs to be fellowship. Yes. And the fourth requirement before marriage requirement is harmony. Harmony. We see this in verse 15. What harmony is there between Christ and Belial? Yeah, so we don't need drama, we don't need strife before marriage. There needs to be harmony. And not to say that people won't have challenges. People will have challenges. You will have challenges before marriage, but there needs to be harmony. Harmony is a requirement before marriage. Yeah, and then the fifth point that I have here before marriage requirement is agreement. Agreement. We see this in the same verse 16. What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? Yeah. So agreement is important, and also not to say that there can't be disagreement, because it's two different people coming together. But if you are always disagreeing on everything, there is never an agreement, then I would say just look at the situation, look at the relationship with wisdom. Yeah, and look at the relationship and try to apply wisdom, because agreement is important. Agreement, it is important. Yeah. So I hope that this before marriage requirements were useful, we learned that the first requirements, you need to be equally yoked, which means a single believer needs to be joined or paired with another single believer. A single believer needs to pair in order to pull the load together with another single believer. And the second requirement is that righteousness needs to be common. The third requirement is that fellowship, it's required. Harmony, it's required. Agreement, it's required before marriage. Thank you so much for watching this video. If this channel is adding value to your life, please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're watching via YouTube, or follow, like my Facebook page if you are watching via Facebook, and also please follow me on Instagram. I sometimes do quotes. I sometimes do quotes, and you can also see how I look on Instagram. Yes, how I look fully, not a half view. Yeah, it's not important, but yeah, you can follow me on Instagram for the quotes. Yes, thank you so much for watching this video. Until I see you again next time, goodbye.